My name is Jeremy Wilson, 34 years old, and I work as a senior investment advisor at one of New York's top firms. Despite my success, I've always craved my parents' approval, showering them with expensive gifts they barely acknowledge. Last year, I spent $8,600 on their 40th anniversary dinner at Augustine, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. What happened next changed our relationship forever. Their reaction taught me a painful but necessary lesson about self-worth and boundaries. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever felt unappreciated by family, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I finally stood up for myself. Growing up in the Wilson household meant one thing above all else: appearances mattered. My parents, Richard and Elizabeth Wilson, built their identities around status, prestige, and what others thought of them. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Beautiful colonial house in an upscale neighborhood, luxury cars in the driveway, and picture-perfect holiday cards sent to everyone in their extensive social network. My father, Richard, started with nothing, or so he reminded us at every possible opportunity. The son of a factory worker, he clawed his way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, eventually building a successful commercial real estate business. His success story could have been inspiring if it wasn't wielded as a weapon against anyone who failed to meet his impossibly high standards, especially me. When I was your age, I was already managing 3 properties and had savings in the bank, he would say, when I brought home a report card with anything less than straight A's. Success isn't given, Jeremy. It's earned through sacrifice and hard work. My mother, Elizabeth, came from a middle-class background, but had aspirations far beyond her upbringing. She met my father at a charity gala where she was working as an event coordinator. 6 months later, they were married in a lavish ceremony that made the local society pages. She transformed herself into the perfect corporate wife, impeccably dressed, well-versed in wine and art, and ruthlessly efficient at climbing the social ladder. First impressions are everything, Jeremy, she would instruct as she scrutinized my appearance before school. No one respects a person who doesn't respect themselves enough to present their best face to the world. From kindergarten through high school, my life was a carefully orchestrated performance designed to reflect well on the Wilson family name. Piano lessons, competitive swimming, debate club, advanced placement classes. My schedule was packed with activities meant to build the perfect college application. There was no room for normal childhood experiences, no space to discover who I actually was or what I actually enjoyed. My sister Amanda, 2 years younger, somehow escaped the worst of the pressure. She was naturally gifted at everything she attempted: academics, sports, social situations, and her effortless success earned her a freedom I never knew. While I struggled under the weight of expectations, Amanda flourished, becoming the golden child who could do no wrong. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacy. Despite the lack of emotional support, I managed to get into Cornell University with a partial scholarship. My parents' reaction wasn't pride or joy, but a clinical assessment of how this would affect my future earning potential and their social standing. "Cornell is acceptable," my father said. "Not Harvard, but it will do." During college, I discovered my aptitude for finance and investments. The world of numbers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. I graduated with honors and secured a position at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. Over the next decade, I worked my way up, building a reputation as someone with both analytical skill and emotional intelligence, a rare combination in my field. As my career flourished, I continued seeking the approval I'd never received as a child. I sent expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays. I helped my parents upgrade their vacation home in the Hamptons. I took them to exclusive restaurants whenever they visited the city. No expense was spared in my quest to finally hear the words I'd been waiting for my entire life. "We're proud of you, Jeremy." Those words never came. Instead, each gift was met with muted thanks followed by subtle criticism. The watch I gave my father for his 60th birthday was nice, but not a Patek Philippe. The spa weekend I arranged for my mother was relaxing, but the massage therapist wasn't as skilled as the one in Switzerland. Family gatherings were exercises in endurance. Thanksgiving dinners featured detailed accounts of Amanda's latest achievements: her promotion to partner at her law firm, her perfect children, her architect husband's latest commission, while my contributions to the conversation were politely acknowledged, then swiftly redirected. Even when I purchased my penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, a milestone that represented years of hard work and smart investments, my parents managed to diminish the accomplishment. It's a shame about the Western exposure, my mother commented during their first visit. The afternoon sun will fade your furniture terribly. Despite years of therapy helping me recognize this dynamic, something in me still yearned for their approval. I kept trying convincing myself that the perfect gesture would finally break through their walls and allow them to see me, really see me, for the first time. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in early March. 40 years of marriage, Richard and Elizabeth Wilson celebration. My mother had sent it to the entire family, complete with a professional digital invitation and a link to their anniversary gift registry. The message was clear: their 40th wedding anniversary was approaching in May, and it was to be treated as an event of monumental importance. This milestone deserves proper recognition, the email stated. We look forward to celebrating with those who have supported our journey together. Something about the formal language and the implicit expectations stirred a familiar determination in me. Here was an opportunity, perhaps the perfect opportunity, to finally arrange something so spectacular that even my parents couldn't find fault. I would plan an anniversary celebration they couldn't possibly criticize. I began researching immediately, diving deep into forums about the most exclusive dining experiences in New York City. I wanted something beyond the typical Michelin-starred restaurants my parents had frequented. I needed an experience that was not just rare but nearly impossible to obtain. Something that would convey the lengths I was willing to go to earn their approval. That's when I discovered Augustin. Not just any table at Augustin, but their legendary private dining room experience. Augustine had 3 Michelin stars and a reputation for turning away celebrities and politicians who hadn't booked months in advance. Their private dining room was spoken about in hushed tones among the ultra-wealthy, a culinary experience so exclusive that most people didn't even know it existed. The chef Marcel Laurent was famous for creating personalized tasting menus based on interviews with the guests of honor. Each dish told a story incorporating elements from the diner's personal histories and preferences. The wine pairings featured rare vintages, some bottles the last of their kind. The room itself was designed to feel like dining in a French chateau with antique furniture, hand-painted murals, and service, so attentive it seemed to anticipate needs before they arose. Getting a reservation would be nearly impossible. Augustin's private dining room was booked 6 months in advance minimum, but I had an advantage. One of my biggest clients was a silent investor in the restaurant group that owned Augustine. One phone call led to another, and after calling in several favors and making promises I wasn't entirely sure I could keep, I secured the impossible: a reservation for my parents' exact anniversary date. The price was staggering: $8,600 for the complete experience. This included the room rental, the personalized menu consultation, a 7-course meal with wine pairings for 4 people. My parents, myself, and I planned to invite my sister Amanda, and a custom-made anniversary dessert. It was more than many people spent on their entire wedding, but I didn't hesitate. This would be the gesture that finally broke through. To prepare, I scheduled a private consultation with Chef Laurent. I shared stories about my parents, how they met their favorite travel destinations, the foods that held special meaning in their relationship. I mentioned my father's preference for bold Bordeaux wines and my mother's love of delicate French pastries. I described their honeymoon in Provence and their vacation home in the Hamptons. Chef Laurent listened intently, taking notes, and occasionally asking questions that revealed his deep understanding of how food connects to memory and emotion. We will create not just a meal, but a journey through their years together, he promised in his thick French accent. Each course will evoke a memory, a moment they have shared. Beyond the dinner itself, I needed the perfect gift. After considering and rejecting dozens of ideas, I settled on something truly special: a custom-designed platinum photo album filled with images from their 40 years together. I worked with a designer who specialized in heirloom-quality books, sourcing photographs from family archives and having them professionally restored and arranged chronologically. The cover was inlaid with their initials in small diamonds, and the pages were edged in platinum leaf. It cost nearly $3,000, but the result was breathtaking. A tangible history of their life together. As the date approached, I shared my plans with my girlfriend, Melissa. We had been dating for nearly 2 years, and she understood my complicated relationship with my parents better than anyone. While she admired my generosity, her concerns were evident. "Jeremy, I know you want this to be perfect," she said gently, as we lay in bed the week before the dinner. "But I'm worried you're setting yourself up for disappointment. No matter what you do, they might not react the way you hope." "This time is different," I insisted. "This isn't just another gift or dinner. This is something truly exceptional. Even they won't be able to find fault with it." Melissa touched my face, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and concern. "I hope you're right. Just remember that their reaction says more about them than it does about you or your efforts." I nodded, but inside, I was certain this would be the gesture that finally earned their approval. I had covered every detail, anticipated every preference. The evening would be flawless, and for once I would see genuine appreciation in their eyes. In the days leading up to the anniversary, I confirmed every detail multiple times. I personally selected the flowers that would adorn the private dining room, Elizabeth's favorite white peonies and lavender roses. I approved the final menu and wine selections. I even arranged for a private car service to transport my parents to and from the restaurant in comfort and style. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. This would be the night that changed our relationship forever. May 15th arrived with perfect spring weather, mild temperatures, clear skies, and cherry blossoms still clinging to the trees along Park Avenue. I arrived at Augustine an hour early to ensure everything was in place. The private dining room exceeded even my expectations. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the antique mahogany table. Hand-painted silk wallpaper depicted pastoral French landscapes. The place settings featured gold-rimmed limoges, china, and crystal stemware that caught the light like diamonds. Chef Laurent greeted me personally, walking me through the evening's menu one final time. Each course had been thoughtfully designed to evoke a specific memory from my parents' relationship. An amuse-bouche inspired by their first date at a French bistro in Boston. A lobster dish reminiscent of their honeymoon in Provence. A palate cleanser featuring flavors from their favorite vacation spot in Santorini. "Everything is perfect," I assured him, feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. "They're going to be absolutely stunned." I checked my watch, 6:45. My parents were due to arrive at 7, and Amanda had texted that she was running late but would join us by 7:30. I took my position near the private entrance, gift-wrapped photo album in hand, ready to witness their reaction to this extraordinary gesture. 7 o'clock came and went, then 7:15. By 7:30, with still no sign of my parents, I began to worry. Had there been a misunderstanding? A problem with the car service I was about to call when I received a text from my father, running late. Traffic from Westchester. Terrible. Be there by 8. No apology, no acknowledgement of the inconvenience, just a statement of fact. I informed the staff of the delay, and they assured me it wasn't a problem. Amanda arrived at 7:45, looking harried but elegant in a black cocktail dress. "Sorry I'm late," she said, kissing my cheek. Court ran over. "This place is incredible, Jeremy. How on earth did you get a reservation?" Before I could answer, the private entrance door opened and my parents finally arrived, nearly an hour late. My father looked distinguished as always in his tailored charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly coiffed. My mother was immaculate in a designer dress I recognized from the latest collection of her favorite French designer, her blonde hair styled in her signature sophisticated updo. Traffic was absolutely dreadful, my mother announced by way of greeting. The driver should have known to take the alternate route this time of evening. I swallowed my frustration and smiled. "I'm just glad you're here. Happy anniversary." I presented them with the photo album, watching hopefully as my mother unwrapped it with her perfectly manicured hands. Her expression remained neutral as she examined the platinum inlaid cover and diamond monogram. "How thoughtful," she said, her tone revealing nothing as she passed it to my father without opening it further. "We can look through it properly later." My father barely glanced at it before handing it to Amanda. "Looks expensive," was his only comment. Determined not to let their lukewarm response dampen the evening, I guided them into the dining room. For a brief moment, I saw genuine impressions of awe on their faces as they took in the opulent setting. My heart lifted. This was the reaction I had been hoping for. "The chandelier is lovely," my mother commented, glancing upward. "Though I prefer the Italian crystal in the dining room at the Hamptons house." And just like that, my momentary hope deflated. Chef Laurent appeared to personally welcome them, explaining in his charming accent how honored he was to create a special menu celebrating their 40 years together. My mother smiled politely but interrupted him mid-sentence. "I hope there's no garlic in anything," she said. "I find American chefs tend to overuse it terribly." I watched Chef Laurent's professional smile tighten, almost imperceptibly. "Madam, I assure you each ingredient is balanced precisely for the perfect flavor profile. But I am happy to adjust any dish to your preference." The sommelier arrived to present the first wine, a rare vintage champagne selected specifically to complement the amuse-bouche. As he described its provenance and tasting notes, my father cut him off. "I know this producer," he said dismissively. "Their 2011 vintage was far superior to this one." The sommelier, to his credit, didn't miss a beat. "You have an excellent palate, sir." The 2011 was indeed exceptional. This 2015 has different qualities that pair specifically with your first course, but I would be happy to seek an alternative if you prefer. The first course arrived. Delicate scallops with a saffron emulsion presented on shells that had been hand-painted with edible gold. My mother studied the plate with narrow eyes before taking a tentative bite. "The scallops are slightly overdone," she declared after a moment, "and there's a hint of garlic despite my request." There was no garlic in the dish. I had reviewed the ingredients personally. But rather than contradict her, I watched as the waiter immediately offered to replace her plate. She waved him away with a flick of her wrist. "No need to make a fuss. I'll manage." With each subsequent course, their criticism grew bolder. The lobster was not as fresh as what we get in Maine. The wine pairing with the duck course was too obvious a choice. The lighting was a touch too dim for proper appreciation of the food presentation. The temperature of the room was slightly too cool for comfort. I maintained my composure, smiling through clenched teeth and making apologetic eyes at the impeccable staff who continued to provide flawless service despite my parents' behavior. Amanda shot me sympathetic glances across the table but said nothing to intervene. Then came the moment that would replay in my mind for months afterward. The fifth course had just been served. A perfectly aged Wagyu beef with truffle and a reduction sauce that had taken 3 days to prepare. My mother took one bite, placed her fork down with deliberate slowness, and looked directly at me. "Jeremy," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment that had been the soundtrack of my childhood. "We appreciate the effort, but frankly, we're too good for your cheap restaurant. I expected something truly special for such an important occasion." The table fell silent. Even Amanda looked shocked. $8,600. More than many people made in months. And my mother had just called it cheap. Before I could respond, my father added his assessment. "Son, if you want to impress us, you need to aim higher. Double the budget, and maybe we'll come. This is adequate for an ordinary evening, but hardly befitting a 40th anniversary celebration." Something inside me cracked in that moment. A fissure in the foundation of decades of seeking approval. But years of conditioning kept me from responding honestly. Instead, I heard myself say, "You're absolutely right. I should have done better." The rest of the meal passed in a blur. I barely tasted the remaining courses or heard the conversation around me. When the custom anniversary dessert arrived, an architectural masterpiece of chocolate and sugar designed to look like the French chateau where they had celebrated their 10th anniversary, my mother merely commented that the proportions were slightly off compared to the actual building. As we waited for the car service at the end of the evening, my mother patted my arm with a condescending smile. "It was a nice attempt, dear. Perhaps for our 45th you can consult us first about our preferences." They left without looking back, the platinum photo album, forgotten on the table until Amanda noticed and picked it up to take home with her. She lingered after they departed, clearly wanting to say something meaningful. "Jeremy, that was the most incredible dining experience I've ever had," she finally offered. "I don't know what's wrong with them. Nothing would ever be good enough." I nodded mutely, too emotionally exhausted to respond. As I signed the astronomical bill adding a generous tip for the staff who had endured my parents' behavior with grace, the maitre d' approached. "Mr. Wilson," he said quietly on behalf of Chef Laurent and the entire team at Augustin, "I want to express our gratitude for your patronage. We hope we can serve you again, perhaps with different guests next time." His knowing look contained more understanding than my own family had ever shown me. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake beside Melissa, replaying every moment of the disastrous evening, while she slept peacefully unaware of the storm raging inside me. The phrase, "we're too good for your cheap restaurant," echoed in my mind, each repetition sharpening the pain of the rejection. When morning finally came, I felt hollowed out as if something essential had been scraped from my core. Melissa found me sitting at the kitchen island, staring into a cold cup of coffee I'd forgotten to drink. "That bad, huh?" she asked gently, sliding onto the stool beside me. I recounted the evening in excruciating detail. My mother's dismissive comment about the cheap restaurant, my father's demand to double the budget, the forgotten photo album, and my own pathetic response. "You're absolutely right." Melissa listened without interrupting, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Jeremy, I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it this time," she said, her voice firm but kind. "This isn't about the restaurant being inadequate. No restaurant would ever be good enough. No gift would ever be appreciated enough. This is about them and their inability to express genuine gratitude or appreciation. I know that intellectually I admitted. But some part of me keeps thinking the next time will be different. And that's the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results," she replied. "How many more decades are you going to sacrifice trying to win approval from people who are constitutionally incapable of giving it?" Her words hit me with unexpected force. How many more decades? Indeed. How much more money, time, and emotional energy would I pour into this bottomless pit of parental approval seeking? As if the universe wanted to drive the point home, my phone pinged with a notification. My mother had posted on her social media account, a platform she used primarily to showcase her perfect life to her extensive network of society friends. Curiosity compelled me to look, though. I already knew what I would find. There it was, a carefully filtered photo of my parents clinking champagne glasses at Augustine, with a caption that made my blood run cold. Anniversary dinner at Augustine. Beautiful setting, though the food was disappointing given the restaurant's reputation. At least the company was delightful. 40 years strong, only the best. No mention of who had arranged the dinner. No acknowledgement of the cost or effort involved. Just public criticism of an experience that had cost me $8,600 and countless hours of planning. Something shifted inside me at that moment. A fundamental realignment of my understanding of our relationship. This wasn't just rudeness or high standards. This was pathological ingratitude. This was emotional vampirism that would continue indefinitely unless I chose to end it. I had arranged a follow-up brunch for Sunday, another expensive reservation at their favorite spot overlooking Central Park. Without hesitation, I picked up my phone and canceled it. Then I sent a brief text to my parents: "Sunday brunch canceled. Need some time to myself." My phone rang almost immediately. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Jeremy, what do you mean brunch is canceled?" Her voice carried that familiar note of entitled indignation. "We've already planned our entire weekend around it." "I'm sorry for the late notice," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "But after last night, I need some time to reconsider our relationship." A moment of stunned silence followed, then, "What on earth are you talking about? We had a lovely evening. You called Augustine, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the country, where I spent $8,600 on your dinner. Cheap." Dad told me to double the budget next time if I wanted to impress. You're being ridiculously sensitive, she huffed. We were simply providing constructive feedback. If you can't handle honest opinions, that's hardly our fault. It wasn't constructive, Mother. It was cruel and ungrateful. And it's part of a pattern that's existed my entire life. Her tone shifted instantly, warming with practiced maternal concern. Darling, you know we only want what's best for you. We push because we see your potential. If we seemed unappreciative, it was only because we know you're capable of so much more. The manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed. How had I never recognized it before? I need space, I said firmly. I won't be calling or visiting for a while. I need to think about what kind of relationship is actually healthy for me going forward. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped, the warm facade evaporating instantly. This is about that girlfriend of yours, isn't it? She's turning you against your own family. This is about 34 years of trying to earn approval that never comes. Melissa has nothing to do with it. Well, your father will be absolutely furious when he hears about this childish behavior. I'm sure he will be, I replied. Goodbye, Mother. I ended the call and immediately turned off my phone, knowing it would soon be flooded with messages from both parents. The silence in the apartment felt different now. Not empty, but peaceful. Melissa wrapped her arms around me from behind. I'm proud of you, she whispered. That couldn't have been easy. Later that day, I called my sister Amanda. I needed to explain my decision before she heard a distorted version from our parents. I've decided to take a step back from Mom and Dad, I told her, after exchanging pleasantries. Last night was the final straw. I expected resistance, or at least surprise. Instead, she sighed with what sounded like relief. Honestly, it's about time, Jeremy. What do you mean? I mean, I've been watching them treat you like this for years, and it breaks my heart. They do it to me too, just differently. Nothing I accomplish is ever because of my own merit. It's always because I'm a Wilson, or because Dad made the right connections. But you're the golden child, I said, confused. They always held you up as the example I should follow. Amanda laughed, but there was no humor in it. And they always told me I should be more financially successful like you. It's how they keep control, playing us against each other while ensuring neither of us ever feels quite good enough. The revelation stunned me. All these years I'd assumed Amanda was exempt from the toxic dynamics that had shaped my life. So you understand why I need to step away. More than understand. I respect it. And honestly, I've been considering setting some boundaries myself. Maybe we can support each other through it. That conversation with Amanda became the first step in building a new kind of family relationship, one based on mutual support rather than competition and criticism. The week following my decision was exactly as difficult as I had anticipated. My parents launched a full-scale offensive, designed to bring me back in line. First came the barrage of calls and texts, dozens of them, ranging from guilt-inducing, "How could you do this to your mother, who sacrificed everything for you," to threatening, "You'll regret this decision when it comes time to discuss inheritance matters," to faux concerned, "We're worried about your mental health, dear." When I didn't respond to any of these messages, they expanded their tactics. My father called several of my colleagues under the guise of investment advice, clearly fishing for information about my state of mind. My mother reached out to mutual friends, spinning a tale of worry about her troubled son who was acting out of character. The most predictable move came next, the flying monkeys. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly felt compelled to call me about the importance of family. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, was the first. "Your parents are beside themselves," he informed me gravely. "Whatever disagreement you're having, surely it can be resolved. Family is family, Jeremy. With all due respect, Uncle Robert, this isn't a disagreement. It's a pattern of behavior that's existed my entire life, and I'm finally setting some boundaries." "Boundaries," he repeated, as if I'd used a foreign word. "They're your parents, not business associates. You don't set boundaries with parents." This sentiment was echoed by various cousins, my father's golf buddies, and even my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, who had herself been the target of my mother's criticism for decades, but still insisted I was breaking your poor Seth. Mother's heart. The most transparent attempt at manipulation came in the form of a certified letter from my father's attorney containing documents related to their will and estate planning. The message was clear: continue to play by their rules or risk financial consequences. What my father had failed to recognize was that I had built my own wealth. His financial threats held no power over me anymore. 2 weeks into my self-imposed separation, my mother orchestrated a chance encounter at my favorite lunch spot near my office. I was midway through a client meeting when they appeared at my table, all concerned smiles and public displays of affection. "Jeremy, darling." "What a wonderful coincidence," my mother exclaimed loudly enough for nearby diners to hear. "We were just shopping in the area and thought we'd grab lunch. May we join you?" The strategic brilliance was undeniable. I couldn't cause a scene in front of a client without appearing unprofessional. I made brief introductions, finished the meeting as quickly as possible, and then turned to my parents. "That wasn't a coincidence," I said quietly. "I asked for space, and you're deliberately ignoring my request." "We're worried about you," my father replied. "This behavior isn't like you. Actually, it is like me. The real me who's finally standing up for himself. Now I need to get back to work." I stood to leave, but my mother grabbed my arm. "We're having a family dinner on Saturday. Your presence is expected. 6 o'clock sharp." It wasn't an invitation, but a command. I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I won't be there. I meant what I said about needing space." My father's face darkened. "You're acting like a child. This has gone on long enough." "I'm acting like an adult with healthy boundaries," I corrected him. "And it's only been 2 weeks. I'll contact you when I'm ready." I walked away, feeling their stares burning into my back. Later that afternoon, I received text messages from 3 different relatives, informing me of my obligation to attend the family dinner. The coordination was almost impressive. Against my better judgment, I did agree to one family meeting, a dinner with my parents Amanda and her husband Michael at a neutral restaurant. Amanda had suggested it might help establish new patterns of interaction if conducted in a public place with supportive allies present. That dinner was a masterclass in manipulation tactics. My mother arrived looking fragile with carefully applied makeup that emphasized her apparent exhaustion. She dabbed at her eyes periodically with a monogrammed handkerchief, though no actual tears were visible. "We just want to understand what we've done to deserve this treatment," she said tremulously. "We've only ever wanted the best for you, Jeremy." Amanda, bless her, intervened before I could respond. "Mom, I think what Jeremy is trying to say is that there's a difference between wanting the best for someone and making them feel like nothing they do is ever good enough." My mother's expression hardened momentarily before she composed herself. "That's absolutely not true. We've always been tremendously proud of both of you. Can you name a time when you expressed that pride without adding a criticism or suggestion for improvement?" I asked. The table fell silent. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We express our pride in different ways," he finally said. "Not everyone needs constant validation and praise." "It's not about constant praise," I replied. "It's about basic gratitude and respect. I spent $8,600 on your anniversary dinner and you called it cheap. That's not high standards. That's deliberate cruelty." "You're holding one comment against us," my mother exclaimed. "That hardly seems fair." "It's not one comment. It's a lifetime of comments. A pattern that I'm only now recognizing for what it island." The conversation circled endlessly with my parents, alternating between defensive justification. "We only pushed you because we believed in your potential," and wounded innocence. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Nothing was resolved, but something important had changed. I no longer felt responsible for their emotions or compelled to earn their approval. After that difficult dinner, I began working with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and narcissistic relationships. Dr. Angela Chen helped me understand the patterns that had defined my life for so long. "What you're describing is classic narcissistic parenting," she explained during one session. The parent's ego needs come before the child's emotional needs. Achievements are either claimed as a direct result of the parent's influence or dismissed as inadequate. There's no winning because the game is rigged from the start. With her guidance, I began to recognize the manipulation tactics that had always worked on me before: the guilt trips, the gaslighting, the triangulation between family members, the public displays of affection contrasted with private criticism. Your worth isn't determined by their ability to recognize it, Dr. Chen reminded me. That's the most important thing to understand as you move forward. I began building a support system outside my biological family. Melissa, of course, was my rock throughout the process. But I also reconnected with friends I'd neglected during years of prioritizing family obligations. I joined a support group for adult children of narcissistic parents, where I met others with similar experiences. Perhaps most significantly, I spent Thanksgiving, traditionally a mandatory Wilson family gathering, with Melissa's family in Connecticut instead. Her parents were warm, down-to-earth people who expressed genuine interest in my life and career without judgment or hidden agendas. "Is it always like this at your house?" I asked Melissa, as we helped clear the dishes after dinner. "Like what?" "Relaxed. No walking on eggshells. No passive-aggressive comments about the food or decor or life choices." She looked at me with a mixture of love and sadness. "Yes, Jeremy. This is what family is supposed to feel like." 6 months of limited contact with my parents created space for tremendous personal growth. The energy I had previously spent trying to earn their approval was now channeled into more fulfilling aspects of my life. My relationship with Melissa deepened and strengthened without the shadow of parental judgment hanging over us. We began discussing our future together more seriously: where we might want to live, whether we wanted children, how we would handle our finances as a married couple. These conversations flowed naturally without the anxiety that had previously accompanied any thought of introducing Melissa further into my family dynamics. "I love seeing this version of you," she told me one evening as we walked through Central Park. "You're more confident, more present. It's like you've dropped a 100-pound weight you've been carrying your whole life." She was right. The constant background process of anticipating my parents' criticism and planning how to manage their reactions had consumed mental bandwidth I hadn't even realized was being drained. Now that energy was available for creativity, connection, and joy. My parents predictably did not accept their reduced role in my life without a fight. Their attempts to regain control evolved and escalated over time, becoming increasingly desperate as they realized their usual tactics were no longer effective. The surprise visit to my office was a particularly bold move. I returned from lunch one afternoon to find them chatting with my assistant, as if they had a scheduled appointment. "Jeremy, look who's here," my assistant said, cheerfully unaware of the complicated dynamics at play. My father stepped forward, hand extended professionally, as if we were business associates rather than estranged family members. "Son, we were in the neighborhood for a meeting and thought we'd stop by to see your operation here." Impressive setup. The strategic brilliance of the ambush was undeniable. They had correctly assumed I wouldn't create a scene in my professional environment. I maintained my composure, gave them a brief impersonal tour of the public areas of the office, and then firmly escorted them to the elevator. "Please don't show up at my workplace, unannounced again," I said quietly as the doors opened. "If you want to see me, call first. We wouldn't have to resort to these measures if you'd simply return our calls," my mother replied with a tight smile. "This estrangement is getting ridiculous, darling." "It's not an estrangement, Mother. It's a boundary. There's a difference." The elevator doors closed on their shocked expressions. 2 weeks later came the health scare. I received an urgent call from my father informing me that my mother had been rushed to the hospital with a serious condition and was asking for me. Heart racing, I immediately left work and drove to the hospital, all our conflicts temporarily forgotten in the face of a genuine emergency. When I arrived, I found my mother sitting up in bed, looking perfectly fine aside from a strategically placed IV line. Her serious condition turned out to be mild dehydration following a spa treatment. She had indeed been admitted to the hospital, but there had been no emergency, no danger, and certainly no doctors rushing to her side as my father had implied. "Jeremy, darling, "You came," she said, reaching for my hand with a performance worthy of a soap opera actress. "I was so worried we'd lost you forever." The manipulation was so transparent that something inside me shifted permanently. This wasn't just unhealthy behavior. It was deliberately calculating. They had exploited my natural concern for my mother's well-being to force an interaction I had been clear I wasn't ready for. I stayed exactly 15 minutes, maintained a polite but distant demeanor, and then left with a newfound clarity. These were not people who had my best interests at heart. These were people who viewed me primarily as an extension of themselves, a source of validation and status rather than an individual with my own needs and boundaries. That realization, painful as it was, accelerated my healing process. I began working with Dr. Chen on accepting the parents I actually had rather than longing for the parents I wished they could be. I learned to recognize and honor my own achievements without seeking external validation. I practiced setting and maintaining boundaries without guilt or self-recrimination. During this period of growth, my career flourished in unexpected ways. Without the energy drain of constantly seeking parental approval, I found myself more creative in my investment strategies and more present with my clients. I received a significant promotion, becoming the youngest partner in my firm's history. My relationship with Amanda also evolved into something new and healthier. We began meeting regularly without our parents, sharing experiences and insights from our respective journeys toward more balanced family dynamics. "I've started therapy too," she confided during one of our lunches. "Michael has been saying for years that our family isn't normal, but I always defended Mom and Dad. Watching how they've treated you these past months has been eye-opening." "How are they treating you now?" I asked. She sighed. "They've doubled down on me since you've been distant. More calls, more unannounced visits, more unsolicited advice about how to raise the kids. And now that I'm seeing the patterns, I can't unsee them." "Are you setting boundaries too?" "Starting to. It's harder with the kids involved. They use grandparent privileges as leverage. But we're working on it." Michael has been incredibly supportive. Perhaps the most significant development during this period was my decision to propose to Melissa. In the past, I would have felt obligated to ask for my father's blessing, or at least inform my parents of my intentions before taking such a step. This time, I simply followed my heart. I proposed during a weekend trip to the Berkshires, presenting Melissa with a vintage sapphire ring we had admired together in an antique shop months earlier. Her joyful acceptance was untainted by any anxiety about my parents' reaction to the news. We agreed to tell them together on our terms once we'd had time to enjoy our engagement privately. When we finally shared the news over a brief, carefully orchestrated lunch, their reaction was exactly as expected. Sapphire rather than diamond. "An unusual choice," my mother commented, examining Melissa's ring with a critical eye. "Spring weddings are terribly common," my father added. "You might consider a winter date to stand out." But their reactions no longer had the power to diminish our joy. We simply smiled, changed the subject, and limited the lunch to exactly 90 minutes before making a polite exit. "That wasn't so bad," Melissa said as we walked away from the restaurant. "Only because we didn't give them the power to make it bad," I replied, squeezing her hand. That's the difference. As the 1-year mark of my boundary setting approached, I reflected on how much had changed. I was happier, healthier, and more authentically myself than I had ever been. My relationship with Melissa was thriving, my career was advancing, and I had developed genuine friendships that weren't overshadowed by family obligations. Most importantly, I had finally accepted a truth that had been waiting for me all along. I deserved respect, appreciation, and love that didn't come with conditions. And if my parents couldn't provide that, I could still create a fulfilling life surrounded by people who could. 1 year after the disastrous anniversary dinner at Augustine, I found myself in a profoundly different place, both literally and figuratively. Instead of orchestrating an elaborate, expensive gesture designed to finally win my parents' approval, I was sitting in the sunlit breakfast nook of the brownstone. Melissa and I had recently purchased together, reviewing wedding venue options with our planner. "What about your parents?" the planner asked, when we discussed the size of the ceremony. Are they likely to want to add people to the guest list? Melissa and I exchanged glances, and I felt a surge of gratitude for her understanding as I answered. They'll be invited, but they won't be managing any aspects of the planning. We're keeping the guest list to people who genuinely support our relationship. A year earlier, I couldn't have imagined setting such a clear boundary around something as significant as our wedding. The fear of disappointing my parents would have overridden my own preferences and needs. Now I understood that healthy relationships required mutual respect, something my parents had never demonstrated despite my decades of effort. My relationship with them had evolved into something I would describe as limited but honest. After 9 months of very restricted contact, I had gradually allowed them back into my life, but with clear parameters. We met in public places for defined periods of time. I ended phone calls when the conversation veered into criticism or manipulation. I declined invitations that didn't work for my schedule, without offering elaborate justifications. Most importantly, I no longer sought their approval or validation. My accomplishments were my own. My choices were my own. And my life was my own. This shift hadn't come easily, but the freedom it provided was worth every difficult conversation and uncomfortable moment. My mother still tested boundaries, regularly appearing unannounced at our home, or making passive-aggressive comments about our wedding plans. My father still occasionally made references to the inheritance when he felt I wasn't being sufficiently attentive to their needs. But these tactics no longer had power over me. I've noticed something interesting, I told Dr. Chen during one of our monthly sessions. The more firmly I maintain my boundaries, the more they actually seem to respect me. It's subtle, but it's there. That's often how it works, she replied. When we stop accepting disrespect, we teach others how to treat us. Some people, especially those with narcissistic tendencies, only respect strength and clear limits. This dynamic played out most visibly during the planning of our wedding. My mother initially insisted on inviting dozens of her social connections. People Melissa and I had never met, who she claimed would be devastated to be excluded from such an important event. Our venue capacity is limited, I explained calmly. We're prioritizing people who know us both and support our relationship. But the Andersons have known you since you were a baby. And the Robertsons are practically family. I haven't seen the Andersons in 15 years, Mother. And the last time I met the Robertsons, they didn't remember my name. They're your friends, not mine. This conversation repeated with variations several times, but I remained firm. Eventually, surprisingly, my mother backed down. She didn't apologize or acknowledge my perspective, but she stopped pushing. A small victory that represented a massive shift in our dynamic. The wedding planning also highlighted the stark contrast between my parents and Melissa's family. Her parents offered opinions when asked, but respected our decisions completely. They contributed financially without attaching strings or expectations. They expressed genuine excitement about our choices, rather than suggesting how everything could be improved. Is this how normal families operate? I asked Melissa one evening after a particularly pleasant dinner with her parents. There's no such thing as a perfectly normal family, she answered thoughtfully. But healthy families respect boundaries and prioritize relationships over being right or maintaining control. As our wedding day approached, I reflected on how differently I would have handled this milestone before setting boundaries with my parents. I would have surrendered control of key decisions to avoid conflict. I would have spent beyond our budget to meet their expectations. I would have invited their entire social circle at the expense of our friends. I would have measured the success of our wedding by their approval rather than by our happiness. Instead, we created a celebration that genuinely reflected our values and preferences. We chose a historic library for the ceremony, not because it was the most prestigious venue, but because we both loved books, and the space felt meaningful to us. We limited the guest list to 80 people who truly knew and supported us. We selected a menu that featured our favorite foods rather than the most impressive or expensive options. The result was a wedding day filled with authentic joy rather than performance anxiety. When my parents arrived impeccably dressed and ready to assume their roles as the center of attention, they found themselves part of a celebration they couldn't control or criticize effectively. "You've done a lovely job with the arrangements," my mother commented during the reception, examining the centerpieces with her critical eye, though I might have chosen slightly larger floral displays for impact. A year earlier, this comment would have devastated me. Confirmation that once again my efforts weren't quite good enough. Now I simply smiled and said, "We're happy with them exactly as they are," before moving on to greet other guests. That moment encapsulated the transformation in our relationship. I no longer needed her approval to validate my choices. I could acknowledge her opinion without absorbing it as truth. I could love her without needing her to be someone she wasn't capable of being. In the months following our wedding, I continued to refine and maintain the boundaries that had restored my emotional health. Sometimes this meant declining invitations to family events that I knew would be stressful. Sometimes it meant limiting phone calls to 15 minutes when the conversation became negative. Sometimes it meant simply saying, "I'm not comfortable discussing that." When my parents probed into areas of my life I preferred to keep private. The most profound change, however, wasn't in how I handled my parents, but in how I viewed myself. I no longer measured my worth by their validation or anyone else's. I recognized my own achievements without needing external confirmation of their value. I trusted my own judgment about what was best for my life and relationship. This hard-won self-confidence extended to every area of my life. My career, where I began taking calculated risks that paid off in both financial and professional satisfaction. My friendships, which grew deeper as I became more authentic. And most importantly, my marriage, which thrived in the healthy emotional environment we created together. Looking back on that disastrous anniversary dinner, my mother's cruel comment about the cheap restaurant, my father's demand to double the budget, my own defeated response of, "You're absolutely right," I could now see it for what it was: not a failure on my part, but the inevitable result of a dynamic that had been broken long before I made that reservation. The real gift of that painful evening wasn't the $8,600 meal or the platinum photo album they barely acknowledged. It was the moment of clarity that finally allowed me to see our relationship for what it truly was and take the necessary steps to change it. Life has a way of teaching us the lessons we need most often through experiences we would never choose. My journey to establish healthy boundaries with my parents was difficult, painful, and at times heartbreaking. But it was also necessary and ultimately liberating. I share this story not because I've achieved some perfect resolution. My relationship with my parents is still complicated and requires constant vigilance, but because I know there are others out there struggling with similar dynamics, wondering if they're wrong to want basic respect and appreciation from the people who should love them most. You're not wrong. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide or how well you perform. You deserve relationships based on mutual respect rather than control and criticism. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for difficult family members, is to establish firm boundaries that create the possibility of healthier interactions. The path isn't easy, but on the other side of that difficult journey lies a freedom that's worth every uncomfortable conversation, every guilty feeling, every moment of doubt. You can love someone while still protecting yourself from their harmful behavior. You can honor your parents without sacrificing your self-respect. You can create a family of choice that provides the unconditional support your family of origin couldn't manage. And perhaps most importantly, you can break the cycle so that if you choose to have children of your own, they'll never have to wonder if they're enough just as they are. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see your worth? How did you handle it? And what did you learn from the experience? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect their peace, even from the people who should be their biggest supporters. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to love yourself enough to walk away from those who don't.